December 1942. In Norway's Telemark region, the nights were not quiet. They were ruled by fear. The German army had occupied the country for 2 years, but among those cold mountains, in a place very few knew about, the Rjukan Valley, an invisible war was being waged. This was a war not of weapons, but of science. On a night when the wind screamed across the Hardanger Plateau, as if nature itself tried to hide what was happening, deep under a thick layer of snow, the German engineers at the hydroelectric plant called Vemork were running secret experiments. They were producing a strange liquid known as heavy water. This was the first step toward the atomic bomb. But not everyone in Norway bowed to the Germans. In a small village near the plant, a few old engineers, former technical specialists of the Norwegian army, were working on another project. Their goal was simple: to thwart the Germans' plans. But they wanted to do it with brains, not guns or explosives. Their leader was a 34-year-old engineer named Erik Midtskog. Before the war, he had researched energy systems at the University of Oslo. When the occupation began, the Germans shut down his lab and confiscated his work. Now Erik seemed to be nothing more than a village electrician. But at night, he and his friends quietly formed an engineer resistance. One night, while Erik walked across a frozen lake, he heard a crunch underfoot. Under the ice, a blue light shone, a natural wonder, and an idea struck him. If the light can pierce the ice like that, he thought, maybe we can crack the Germans' technology the same way. Erik and his team devised a plan. Without directly interfering with the heavy water process the Germans used at Vemork, they would create a mechanism that would render it useless. They didn't want this to look like sabotage. They wanted it to appear as an invisible technical fault. But to do that, they needed an energy circuit that was both stable and secret. Erik ran experiments at night. He had secretly studied old diagrams of the plant. He proposed an idea that seemed incredible for the time, a mechanism that combined electrical power with the pressure of mountain glaciers. If it worked, the Germans' equipment would no longer run reliably. Everything went perfectly until one night a new German officer arrived at the plant. He was a technology expert named Heinrich Voss. His job was to increase the plant's productivity. He had a talent for understanding what people were up to. Once he noticed a malfunctioning sensor at the plant and suspected that someone had altered the system from inside. For Erik and his friends, this was a deadly signal. German attention had turned toward them. Every step, every movement was being watched. One night, Erik sat in an old barn in the village and picked up a rusty piece of metal. That piece was actually the core of their secret invention, a small energy converter they named Nordlys, Norwegian for Northern Lights. Its purpose was to vary the plant's electrical stability with microsecond tremors. It sounded simple, but it would silently destroy the German system. Yet the invention had not been fully tested. Voss was already suspicious, and patrols searched the villages. Erik said to his friends in one sentence, "If we don't test this device tomorrow night, we'll never have another chance." At midnight, they slipped into the plant. Cutting through the snow and moving silently through the cold shaft, each breath fogged into steam. Erik's hands were frozen as he installed the device, but his eyes shone. He connected it to the power line and pressed the button. Seconds passed. Nothing happened. There was silence in the group. Then the plant's lights flickered. German technicians panicked. Sensors showed strange signals. Voss burst into the room and shouted, "Was ist das? What is this?" Erik watched the building's lights flicker from a distance in the snow and murmured, "The northern lights have begun." But at that moment, gunshots rang out behind them. A German patrol had traced their tracks. When Erik lifted his head, he saw only one thing: green lights dancing in the night sky. His invention had worked, but now he and his team had to choose between fleeing and preserving their lives. The German officer's offer. Dawn had not yet risen over the Rjukan Valley. The sky was gray, snow was falling, and the wind howled through the mountains. The events of the previous night, the strange energy disturbance at Vemork and the ensuing search, were now the only topic anyone in the area spoke about. The Germans didn't understand what had happened, but they felt it was no accident. Erik and his friends, Lars, Gunnar, and the elderly engineer Nils, had fled the plant and taken refuge in the Hardanger Mountains. Their clothes were torn, their hands frozen, even breathing hurt. The worst part was that the Nordlys device remained behind in the plant. It had already started working, but no one knew how much damage it had done to the Germans. Heinrich Voss walked the site that morning, inspecting every detail. Broken cables and scorched resistors indicated the system had been disrupted from within. He did not shout sabotage like the other officers. His gaze was deeper, as if in awe of someone's intellect. "This isn't ordinary sabotage," he said quietly. "This is the work of someone who knows mathematics, engineering, and physics." That night, he walked alone into the plant's laboratory. German technicians were afraid to enter. Strange electrical waves were coursing, devices flickered on their own. Voss stooped and picked up a component. On a small metal plate there was a Norwegian inscription, NL, Nordlys. He remembered that name, Erik Midtskog. He had read Erik's 1939 paper from the University of Oslo, in which Erik discussed a principle called the Nordlys principle. Back then, it had not gone beyond theory. Voss smiled slowly. "So, you're still alive, Midtskog." In the mountains, the situation worsened. Erik's team hid in a cave. With frozen hands, Erik opened an old map. "We can't stay here," he said. "The Germans are searching. But I want to know, did the device work?" Lars answered in fear, "If it worked, we're dead. They won't let us live." Erik fell silent. He was afraid, but felt a strange longing inside to see the result of his invention. Maybe this was not just a war, but a battle of science. At dawn, a voice called from the cave mouth. "Midtskog, come out, I want to speak." They froze. The voice was familiar. When Erik emerged, he saw a lone German officer standing below, Heinrich Voss. He held no weapon, only a white cloth like a handkerchief. "I know you," Voss said with a cold smile. "I have read your papers. Tell me what you did. What is this device?" Erik looked at him in surprise. In that moment he wanted to shoot, run, hide. But something in Voss's voice was not hostile. It was merely curious. "This is something you won't understand," Erik replied. "On the contrary," Voss answered, "I understand you. You are like me. We are both men of science. But you hid your idea, and I turned it into German technology. The principle you created could be the foundation for my project." Erik stepped forward. "I didn't create science to kill people." Voss smiled. "I know. But now you want to use your idea to stop the German Empire. Interesting, isn't it?" Silence fell. Snow swirled. Two engineers, one occupier, one resistor, stood on the same mountain and looked at each other. Only their aims distinguished them. Voss produced a small metal piece from his pocket. It was a part of the Nordlys device. "This is yours, right?" he said. "This part disrupts system harmony, yet it can also stabilize it. It's a contradictory design." Erik narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Voss stepped closer. "I want to work with you." Erik froze. "Are you mad?" "No," Voss said. "I am a realist. You can run now and in a few days be captured and killed. Or work with me and protect your technology. I give you a choice. Either vanish in the Norwegian mountains or leave a mark in history." Erik looked at him, then at the silent sky beyond the mountains. Inside him, a struggle started. The offer was both salvation and betrayal, but also an opportunity. If he worked with Voss, he might be able to sabotage the German system from within. He said softly, "If I go with you, I will have conditions." Voss smiled. "Of course. Every great invention has its terms." This conversation felt like the beginning of an agreement that could change the course of the war. But Erik did not know that behind that agreement there was another secret plan, for both him and Voss. On the icy mountains, this strange alliance was about to become Scandinavia's most powerful. The Secret Laboratory and the Two-Faced Pact, January 1943. Winter in Norway had reached its peak. Mountains lay in white silence. Roads were closed. But the silence was only in nature. Within the German army, in the shadow of science, a storm was brewing. Erik Midtskog was no longer in the mountains. Under Voss's escort, he had been brought to the Keller Research Center near Oslo. Officially, he was registered as a German scientific collaborator. In truth, he was neither prisoner nor fully free. It was a delicate balance, to work secretly under Voss's protection. The laboratory was built into a deep hill and lay among tunnel-like corridors. Doors were coded, rooms encrypted. German technology here had reached a peak. Every detail seemed designed to read a human mind. The first time Erik entered this center, he was both awed and afraid. Devices gleamed on tables. Pressure-measuring glass tubes and electrical resonance modules glinted. As an engineer, his mind analyzed every detail. But his heart still longed for the freedom of the mountains. Voss took him into a room and quietly said, "This will be your new laboratory. You will work here. But remember, every move is watched." Erik asked, "Will I have the materials I need?" Voss smiled. "Everything you need will be here. Just don't deceive me." In the first weeks, Erik seemed obedient. He worked with the German engineers and built mathematical models to stabilize energy systems. But secretly, he planned differently. He prepared a second version of Nordliss, called Nordliss 2. This variant would change the main circuit that powered the German systems, but do it at a level no one would notice, through micromagnetic tremors. Each night after doors closed, he took out secret notes written in Norwegian with coded sentences and hidden messages. On one page he wrote, "If they use light for their purposes, I will bend that light until it falls upon them." But he did not know that Voss watched him. The officer's room had many monitors and magnetic tapes. Every experiment was recorded. Voss wanted to know Erik's secrets, but he did not rush. He wanted to determine the end of this game himself. One evening, Voss entered the lab while Erik was running a current test. A blue light filled the chamber. "What is this?" Voss asked. Erik answered without hesitation. "A new energy resonance model, a stabilization system." "Nordliss, isn't it?" Voss said. Erik froze. His heart skipped. "Yes, but this is a different version." "I don't know why," Voss smiled, "but it seems every discovery of yours hides a secret, as if you're hiding something." Erik smiled calmly. "Every invention secret should stay inside the mind that created it, sir." Voss liked the reply, but he too was playing his own game. That night, Voss secretly tried to read Erik's notes, but the coded writings looked meaningless. Still, one phrase repeated, "The white light will return." Months passed and Erik began making small changes in the lab systems. His device no longer only manipulated power flow, it altered information streams as well. The Germans' communication lines began to fill with silent errors, as if the system itself were deceiving them. Voss noticed. One evening he summoned Erik to his office. "Mitskog," he said, "you are very clever. But you don't understand that I am as clever as you. You are planting secret codes into the system. I see this." Erik showed no emotion. "If that's so, why don't you arrest me?" Voss approached the desk quietly. "Because I want to know what you're up to. You aren't working only for Norway. You are taking revenge for something, no?" Erik remained silent, though his eyes seemed to say everything. Voss looked at him and whispered, "I don't want to kill you. I want to understand you. But remember, every secret eventually ends." When Erik left the lab that night, he felt a decision forming inside him. If Voss already sensed everything, then the next phase of the game had to begin. He would complete the Nordliss 2 and integrate it into the system. But this time his purpose was different, to turn the Germans' own weapon against them. Ahead lay a major test. The Germans were developing a new energy burst generator, and Erik's device would be placed at its core. If the plan worked, German technology would be destroyed. If it failed, his name would be erased from history. Everything was ready. The laboratory prepared for a test day. Voss himself would supervise. But no one knew that on that day, not only technology, but the freedom of human thought would be put to the test. The Nordliss explosion, March 1943. The Keller laboratory was unusually quiet that morning. Normally, mornings brought metallic noises from the doors, the hum of machinery, and the footsteps of German soldiers. But today, it was as if everyone held their breath. For today, the energy burst generator would be tested. Officially, that was its name. In truth, it was the first and perhaps last test of Erik Mitskog's creation, Nordliss 2. At the center of the lab stood a massive cylindrical chamber. Mottled glass tubes glowed inside. Electric sparks sliced the air. German engineers stood behind protective glass along the room's edge. Their faces showed curiosity, fear, and the stress of not knowing what would happen. Erik stood before the device in silence. He wore a white laboratory coat, but inside him there was such energy that it felt as if even his heartbeat could be heard beneath the fabric. In his right hand lay a small key that would change Nordlys 2's final parameters. The Germans thought it was an ordinary test switch, but that key would reverse the entire direction of the system's power flow with a secret code. Voss stood in a corner. "Ready?" he asked. Eric nodded. "Yes, sir, but the result may surprise you." Voss smiled slightly. "I like scientific surprises." The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. Lights in the room dimmed. The air seemed electrically charged. German technicians read off the device's values. Everyone watched the screens. 2, 1. Eric turned the key. Everything flashed at once. But it was not just a flash. It was the color of the sky. The room filled with green-blue light, as if the northern lights had descended into the laboratory. The current grew so strong that metal walls vibrated, cables heated, and the smell of ozone filled the air. German engineers shouted, "Die Spannung, viel zu hoch!" The voltage, far too high. Voss rushed to the control panel, but impossible numbers scrolled across the screens. The energy doubled every second. This defied physical laws. Eric closed his eyes. He knew then Nordlys 2 was working. But this was not merely energy resonance. It was altering the resonance of reality itself. A few seconds of calm, then a tremendous sound, as if the mountains had exploded. Glass shattered, metal plates buckled. A powerful wave of energy spread through the air. For an instant, light seemed to stop. Then, everything plunged into darkness. Morning. Where the laboratory had stood, there remained only charred metal remains. Some components looked melted. Others seemed to have been vaporized rather than burned away. German engineers searched the area, but Eric was nowhere to be found. He had seemingly dissipated into the air. Voss sat in a corner holding his head. In front of him lay a scorched notebook. Most entries had burned away, but one line remained legible. "When the light returns, they will no longer see us." Voss took a deep breath. He could not understand what had happened, but he was certain of one thing. This explosion was not an ordinary energy malfunction. It was deliberate. A few days later, an official German report was filed. Keller incident. An experimental object was destroyed by an unexplained energy resonance. Chief engineer, Eric Mitskog, is presumed missing. Yet Voss, signing the report, heard a whisper inside him. He didn't die. On the night of the incident, Voss had seen a strange vision. In the center of the blast, Eric's body disappeared, while a radiant halo around him seemed to carry him elsewhere. Weeks passed. A shepherd in the Norwegian mountains saw a strange light in the sky. Amid the green waves, a human-shaped shadow appeared. The shepherd fell to his knees in fear. The shadow looked at him, then faded. From that night on, strange events occurred in the region. German generators failed on their own. Signals were disrupted. And every morning, their communications displayed a message, "Nordlys is active," as if someone was mocking them from afar. In the western mountains of Norway, close to the waters of the Hardanger Fjord, a laboratory operated that was virtually unknown to German intelligence. It was no longer just a research site. It had become the brain center of Norwegian engineers. They worked day and night in such silence that even the sound of the fjord's waves could not reach the depths of the laboratory. The laboratory's director, the now legendary engineer Einar Berglund, repeated the same ritual every morning. He would stand before a large map and carefully track Scandinavia's industrial points, then mark German-controlled regions with a red pencil. The red areas grew each day, yet there was no fear in Einar's eyes. Instead, a strange patience. It was as if he awaited something that would come at the end of that spread. He seemed convinced that the growth of those red marks foretold something. Einar's team included not only people selected for technical skill, but those who combined a desire to keep Norway free with scientific talent. For example, Liv Olsdottir, 24, dove into engineering depths most would not. She worked on heating systems and pressure balance mechanisms. Her idea was simple and bold. If the Germans have more weapons than us, we will create an engineering system that makes their weapons stop working. She led a secret project they called Kraft Null, Power Null. The project aimed to use water pressure to disrupt the internal circuits of German engines, in effect, to employ German technology against its own principles. From a scientific standpoint, it looked impossible, but for the Norwegians, impossibility was no longer an option. Strange occurrences began inside the lab. At night, doors seemed to be knocked, then the sound vanished. Unknown tracks were found on snowy mountain roads. Einar once saw a cigarette light gleaming in the distance on a dark night. They knew they were no longer alone. German intelligence had started to trail them. Despite this, work continued. Einar said, "If they find us, it means we are on the right track. They are afraid." One night, Liv heard a noise at the central generator. She entered and found a cable unplugged. It was clear sabotage. Everyone looked at each other but said nothing. They realized there might be a traitor among them. Einar immediately decided to split the lab's main plans and move them to various secret locations. Each person would know only their piece. If someone was captured, the secret of the whole system would remain protected. That decision became one of the smartest moves of the Norwegian resistance. Meanwhile, strange reports began circulating among German fortifications near Narvik. The Norwegians have discovered a new type of energy system. At first, the Germans thought it a fabrication, but within days, reports arrived to headquarters that some tank engines had failed in the field for no explainable reason. The cause was reported as mechanical freezing, though no traces could explain it. Colonel Obus Schneider muttered, "The Norwegians are turning the air into a weapon, while we keep drawing plans." The news reached Einar's laboratory. They understood Croft Knoll was working. But this was only the beginning. Their goal was not only to disable German technology, but to protect Norway's natural resources. The Germans had their eyes on heavy water production because it played a crucial role in atomic research. Einar and his team knew that if the Germans secured this substance, Europe's history would change. So the next step would be riskier, infiltrating the German heavy water plant. They could no longer hide behind laboratory walls. On a silent night, Einar reviewed his plan one last time. On the map, the red markers had multiplied, but there was one blue marker, the Rjukan plant. His gaze froze, as if an inner voice said, "The fate of the whole war is hidden inside that plant." And so the Norwegian engineers prepared to leave the laboratory. They were no longer mere researchers. Now they were silent fighters. The mountains were silent. It was as if Norway's harsh winter was holding its breath for the event about to unfold. It was February 1943. Snowstorms, freezing winds, and temperatures dropping to -40 degrees. But a group of 6, Einar, Liv, and their 4 engineer colleagues, were defying the cold to embark on the most audacious operation in Norwegian history. Their target was the Vemork heavy water plant in Rjukan. This facility was vital for the German atomic program. If the Germans managed to transport the heavy water produced here back to Germany, the production of an atomic bomb would be only a matter of time. The Norwegian engineers understood this. If we don't stop the plant, the world will burn. Einar unfurled the plan on a table. The lines he had drawn in red pencil wound through the mountains, eventually descending towards a tunnel beneath the plant. If we enter through this tunnel, no one will see us. But remember, there is no door there, only a passage sealed by ice. We must not blow it open. We must open it silently. Liv smiled softly. If engineers can't destroy with silence, who can? They set off at midnight. The snow crunched beneath their feet, their breath rising in plumes of vapor. They carried no weapons, only tools, cables, and their own inventions. Each person carried a metal cylinder on their back. This was a smaller version of the Kraft Knoll system, a device that disrupted pressure balance, causing engines and systems to freeze. Half an hour later, the lights of the plant appeared in the distance. Steam rose from aluminum pipes, and the water supply pipes flowed silently. Everything looked normal, but they knew that behind those lights were hundreds of German soldiers. Einar stopped and looked at his team. From here, there is no turning back. If one is captured, the others will continue. We are engineers, but tonight we must act so that we are remembered as warriors in history. They began to rappel down the sheer cliffs. In the darkness, only their white masks, gleaming in the snow, were visible. The silence was so deep that sometimes it felt as if even the mountains were holding their breath. When Liv reached the tunnel entrance, she knelt. The layer of ice completely covered it. Her hand froze instantly when she touched it. She pulled out a device from her pocket. It contained a mini pressure reactor that emitted heat. She placed the device on the ice, pursed her lips, and whispered, "Now let engineering speak." 5 minutes later, the ice cracked silently, and a dark void appeared inside. They entered. The tunnel was narrow, wet, and foul-smelling. The sound of machinery came from far away. German engines were running. Liv turned on her flashlight, revealing rusty pipes and dripping water on the wall. Einar checked the plan in his hand. The third pipe on the left, that's the main power circulation. If we disrupt it, the entire system will stop. But at that moment, footsteps were heard in the distance. It was a German patrol. Liv immediately turned off the light. Everyone pressed themselves against the wall. The soldiers passed right by them, but a piece of metal under Einar's foot made a faint sound. The soldiers stopped. A moment of silence. Then a light turned. Liv held her breath. The soldiers looked into the tunnel, but turned their light in another direction and walked away. They were safe. Einar immediately activated the Kraft Null device. A small signal lamp blinked. After the Rjukan operation, Norway's silence sounded different. The snow still fell, and the mountains were still quiet, but this time there was a storm behind the silence. The Germans had tasted defeat, and now they had only one goal: find the Norwegian engineers. In Berlin, at a high-level meeting, the Rjukan incident report was placed on the table. It began with a short but frightening sentence: "System freezing caused not by technical reasons, but by human intervention." General Oberst Schneider slammed his fist on the table. So, this was not an accident. The Norwegians have discovered something, a system that destroys German technology. I want to know its name, and who created it. Thus began Operation Icejagd, the ice hunt operation. They started searching for the engineers' trail in the Norwegian mountains, forests, and small villages. Every German patrol was now hunting not just partisans, but also scientists. Einar and his team were in one of their secret mountain hideouts. At night, it felt dangerous to even breathe. Coded signals in Norwegian were heard on the radio. "Vemork plant is clear. The Germans are coming. The northern passes are closed." Liv stared silently out the window. There was both pride and worry in her eyes. She knew they had changed the war somewhat, but this was not the end. A more dangerous phase was beginning: survival. One night, as snow fell, Einar approached Liv. "Our work is not finished. The Germans will now come for our discovery, not for us. If they find it, everything will be over." Liv clenched her lips. "And where is that device now?" Einar slowly pulled a piece of metal from his pocket. "The core of Kraft Null. But we cannot keep it here. The Germans are too close." They decided the main part of the device had to be taken out of Norway, and the remaining technical information had to be broken into fragments. Each person would only memorize one part. This way, no one alone could unlock the system's secret. But that very night, Liv disappeared. Early in the morning, Einar searched everywhere for her. There was only one pair of footprints in the snow, and the tracks led towards the valley. A few hours later, at the bottom of the valley, the tents of a German patrol were visible. Einar understood. Liv had been captured. In the German headquarters, Liv was tied to a metal table. Oberst Schneider stood before her. "I know you created the system at Vemork. We want to learn how it works. If you tell us, I will let you live." Liv fixed her eyes on his face. There was a faint smile at the corner of her bloody lips. "You will never be able to operate it, because it only works where Norway breathes." Schneider's eyebrows furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means it's not for machines like you. It's not for those who can't endure the cold." Schneider angrily left the room, but the sentence Liv spoke did not leave his mind. Meanwhile, Einar was already preparing a new plan. His goal was not just to rescue Liv. He knew how far the Germans would go to make Liv talk. So he decided to launch a deception operation that extended all the way to Berlin. He and his men began sending fake signals, pretending that a second version of Kraft Null was being prepared and would soon be sent to England. German intelligence immediately intercepted this news, and Schneider gave the order. All forces to the northern pass. We must find that device before them. Thus, Einar used the smartest trick to save Liv, diverting the enemy in the wrong direction. One night, Einar approached the German base alone. Crawling under the snow, he slipped inside through old iron pipes. He was near the building where Liv was held. Inside, Liv's voice could be heard in a room. She was not answering the Germans' questions, but her voice was trembling. She was exhausted. Einar pulled a small device from his pocket, a micro version of Kraft Null. It could disrupt electrical systems for a few minutes. He activated the device. Suddenly, the lights in the building began to go out. German soldiers shouted. Einar entered in the darkness, unlocked the table restraints, and grabbed Liv's arm. Liv said in a weak tone, "You shouldn't have come." Einar replied, "If I hadn't come, the war would have ended for me." They fled through the snowstorm and disappeared. The Germans searched everything behind them, but all they found was a metal plate. A sentence was written on it. "The cold of Norway will freeze your mind." Einar and Liv hid in a cave among the mountains. There, Einar held her hand and said quietly, "We are deceiving them, but know that this is not the end yet." They closed her eyes and whispered, "Yes, but this time we won't hide anymore."